Hello everyone, this is Alan again, aka Chita, and today I bring a very special video on this series. On the first episode of this series, I said that I was going to make a video, the next video, so the part 2, on the variables, and now we're on part 8, and I haven't done it yet, so I figured that's only fair that I do it. So this video I want to focus mostly on the roles of variables. I've already explained what they do on part 1. If you want to refresh, you can always go and check it. Although I will be talking a bit of what they do, because it would be impossible to explain the roles without saying what the variables actually are, like what are their actual role on the program. Alright, let's start. So I'll skip the constants because constants are not variables. And I'll skip the two structures because you can't say the role of a variable of a structure, because the structure is just the data type, so you can't say that a string is a fixed value or something like that, because those are just data types, not actual variables. Alright, so in order, let's start on the main program. So the first variable is choice. Now, before we can actually say the role, we need to check what choice does on this procedure, which happens to be the main program. So let's see, choice is declared over here, and then it is used in here to populate. We use the function to populate the variable, and that will change what we're going to do next on this select case. So this select case will tell the rest, and then we're going to finish the loop, and we're going to go back if we have not met a certain criteria, which is a value for choice. So once again, choice is used to populate on the selection, and then to check if we should loop again or not. So for this reason, if you stop to think about it, choice is populated every time that we loop through this through the main program, and choice, the value of choice, will change what we're going to do. This means that choice will always be the most recent value that the user entered, and funnily enough, that's the actual row of the variable. So let's give some space. I think that was a bit too much. Row, I'm going to make comments. Most recent holder. Oh, I should mention that this is a completely new code, straight from the AQA pre-release. I haven't changed anything whatsoever, and I should only use this code for this video in particular, as we're not changing anything in the code, we're just checking what it was there already. Alright, let's move on. Then after the choice we have the DAC. The DAC is an array of 53 elements, with the first element being ignored, and it's an array of the T card, or one of the structures that's being defined, user-defined structures. And the DAC, if you think about it, this variable is declared on the main program, which is the main program is the actual everything that's happening. So the whole program is the main program, and DAC will hold the cards from the DAC. So each element of the DAC will be a single card. This means that if you think about it, in a card game, the cards are the most important values, let's say. That's the way that I like to find the most wanted holder, because the most wanted holder will always hold the most important value for whatever this procedure is accomplishing. On this case we have the whole game, and for the whole game the most important thing are the cards. Although that shouldn't be everything that you check for, but generally that's a nice easy way to find what the most wanted is. Wanted holder. But of course you should always check the definitions. Things may not be as it seems. One example would be this variable, the recent scores. Now recent scores has the identifier with the word recent on it, and is a data type, user-defined data type with the word recent on it. So you might be inclined to say that that would be a most recent holder, simply because, you know, recent, so it would make sense. Although you might miss the fact that this variable is something else. You know, you could say this most recent holder, and you probably wouldn't be wrong, but that's not the most obvious, because of the definitions of the rows. Because if you think about it, transformation, the definition of transformation would be that it always gets the new value from a fixed calculation of other variables. Now that's the exact definition of what's a transformation variable. Let's check. Recent scores is populated within the play game on the update recent score procedure. Then let's go there. Let's see, that's the recent score. Now keep in mind that it changes from procedure to procedure, but you need to check when that function is when that variable recent score from the main is populated, and it's populated here. So that's what we're checking for. Now let's check when this is used. It's used over here to set the check if it is empty or not. So each index of this array is empty or not, and then after we find the empty slot that we want to put, we will populate it with here, which is the here. Now these values will come as this will be entered by the user, so the player name is entered by the user, and the score is a parameter that comes from the play game, and the score is always calculated in the same way, so it has a fixed equation, let's say, a fixed way to populate. So the calculations to fill in this variable are always the same. For that reason, this is transformation, not our most recent holder. Alright, I think that's all the variables for the main program. We can move on. I'll go in order, so just scroll down and go to the next one. Now the next function, the next next two functions, in fact, they behave in ways so similar that we actually have the same amount of variables declared in the same way with the same rows, so I'll do both of them at the same time. The first variable would be a parameter over here, so I will put the comment in here. Right, one more. Is that right? Looks, no, it was right before. Row. And now we can check when is this variable used. Now this variable is already populated, this parameter is populated when it gets to this function, and it's used to check what are we going to do. So the value of this variable will change the outcome, and to me that means that this sets the whole function, which means that that's the most important, that's the most wanted value that we want, and if it holds the most wanted value, that's the most wanted holder. So most wanted holder. Next is the variable rank. Now let's check. Rank is declared, then is given a default value of empty, and then depending on the value for rank number, we have a different value for rank, and this value is very quickly populated and returned, and as soon as we return, we complete this function, which means that the memory space for this function is cleared, which means that the memory space for this variable is cleared. So if you think about it, that's a very short lifespan for a variable that's only used once, and that sounds a lot like a temporary variable to me. So row temporary variable. Alright, next. As I said, these two functions have the exact same variable rows. So let's just very quickly most wanted holder, and then we have a row temporary variable. Alright. Next up is display menu, and display menu doesn't have any variables, so we'll skip it. Then we got get menu choice. Now get menu choice has one variable, which is you might miss it if you don't pay attention. Choice is populated as soon as it's declared, so it's declared and that is populated with the user input. Then nothing else happens to choice. Choice is just outputted afterwards, and since the value doesn't change, and you know we populated, then we right line, then we conclude. So we do a few stuff in between, so it's not a short period of time. We hold it for an extra line. So you know, arguably you could say for that reason this is not it's not temporary variable, and because the value doesn't change ever once it's populated, then that sounds like a fixed value to me. So let's call it row fixed value variable. Okay, next up we got loadDAC. Now loadDAC has a parameter, so we'll start with that, and that should be easy, because as we said on the main program, DAC is the most wanted holder, because that's the most you know, everything runs around that, the value of DAC. And for this we want to, like, everything that we're doing is to change the value and to populate the value of DAC. So you know, once again, that's the value that we want, and if the variable holds the value that we want, that's the most wanted holder. So most wanted holder. Next is what's probably the easiest variable to say the row for, because of the name and what it does. Now it's count, and count you should immediately link to, it goes to a loop that will count how many times we do a loop, most likely. And if that's the case, which it is, as you can see here, count plus count is equal to count plus 1, and that is a stepper, because the definition of stepper is a loop variable. Next, the shuffle DAC. Now shuffle DAC, just like in the load DAC, we got a parameter which is the actual DAC, and once again, for the exact same reasons, that will be the most wanted holder. Then we've got the number of swaps. Now let's check the number of swaps is populated over here, and once it's populated, it's only used in here to find the limit for a for loop, and the value never changes. Now that should be your reference. The value never changes, therefore it's a fixed value. There we go. Fixed value. Then we got position 1 and 2. They behave in the same way, they use for the same things, they have the same row, and the row is transformation. Now if you remember, I said that variables that get their value from a fixed calculation will have fixed values, and that's exactly what we have over here. To fill in position 1, we have a fixed calculation. To fill in position 2, we have another fixed calculation. So both of them are transformation variables. Transformation Now let me just copy and paste for the sake of efficiency, and then we get to swap space. Swap space is used over here to hold the space, to hold a card, really. So to hold a value temporarily while we swap two values around. So we have position 1, we put position 1 in swap space, and then we take position 2 and we fill it with position, so we fill position 1 with position 2, and then we put position 2 as swap space. This is one of the most noticeable examples of follower variables. When you use it to swap two values around, that will most likely be a follower variable. So let's call it like so, follower. Next we got the number of swaps made so far, which is a pretty long named variable, pretty long identifier. Now this variable is used to count the loop, so that should be a reference. As I said before, it's a loop variable, so it's a stepper. So stepper, because it's incremented on each step of the loop. That's where the name comes from. Then next up we got display card. Now display card, we got a parameter which should not be forgotten, and this parameter is populated somewhere else, and it arrives into the display card procedure, and it's used, and the value doesn't change. It is a very quick procedure, so you might be tempted to say temporary, but you know, there are some stuff, they're not related. So you got two console.write line, they don't do much, but they're not related to the actual value. You know, normally a easy way to find out if the variable is temporary or not is if there is anything in between the time that you declare or the time that you populate, at least, with the time that you use it for something else apart from populating it. On this case we have two things, so you know, it's not really a temporary, even though it is quite a short time. But you know, just because it's not exactly by definition, I am going to say that is a fixed value, because the value doesn't change and it's not anything else, so it must be a fixed value. Just simple elimination. Next up we've got quite a few parameters. What I'll do is I'll put a comma in between, so row. Now the first is discard. Now discard is populated from here with one value, and then you know, it's not used again, really, which makes me think that that's another fixed value. So excuse me, fixed value. Then I put a comma, and the next one is stack. Now that's the bit that that's the bit that you might get caught, because every other instance that we saw a variable called DAC of tclar data type, we said that that's the most wanted value. But it's not. Well, one element of this array it is, yes, but not the whole array, because the whole array, the way that this procedure functions is that we change the first index to sorry, not the first index, the first populated index to be the index that we want to see, which is the index that we are now, basically. And because that's something that we are now, and we're soon going to change to the next one, that sounds a lot like a most recent holder, because it is the recent the recent value, so the recent value that we're working with. That's why most recent holder. It makes sense to me. Then we get number of cards turned over, which is pretty easy. If I read the definition of a gatherer, you would quite easily spot that a gatherer is accumulates the effect of individual values. Now, the number of cards turned over is exactly that. It's just the accumulated values, accumulated number of cards turned over, which is a value. So a gatherer. So let's call it gatherer. Gatherer. There you go. Alright, next we got count. Once again, if you see count, you can check for loop, and it is. We got for loop for count, so it's a stepper. Row stepper. Alright. Next is next card higher. Got two parameters, last card and next card. Now, last card, that would be tricky because you could switch the rows around, but one of them will be the most recent and the other one will be the most wanted. Now, because this is the last card, it's the card that we have turned over, it makes sense to me that that's the recent one because that's the one that we are at, and the next card is the card that we want to check for, so that's the most wanted value. So let's very quickly say row most recent holder, most wanted holder. Spell it right. Then we have a higher variable. Now let's check when this variable is used. We'll get higher. Higher is populated over here. Then we check if the next card is greater or equal than the last card. If it is true, then we return true. If it is false, we return false. That is pretty much a fixed calculation because that never changes, and you know that's just a default value. So you could have put in this over here, and it's fine. If you have a default value, a default value is still a fixed calculation. It doesn't change, and you know that to me sounds a lot like a transformation variable. Alright, almost done. Next, get player name. Now, get player name has a single variable, which is player name, and player name would be, if you think about this whole procedure overall, when is it used? Now, it is used within a loop to make sure that sorry, not to make sure, it's used within the whole program loop. So this value will change many times, even though this function is called over and over again. So the memory space is technically cleared. That will be just the current holder, so the recent holder. Let's go row most recent holder. Hope that makes sense. Did I put it in the right place? No, I didn't. Okay, let me move this. Doesn't look alright. Yeah, it is right. There we go. Next, get choice from user. Get choice from user. It has one variable which is choice, and it's populated in the same way as player name, and it works in the same way as player name. So for the same reason, choice will be the most recent holder. recent holder, and I missed one. Yeah. Then return choice, and then we go to display end of game message. Now, display end of game message has a parameter which has a fixed value because it's populated somewhere else and the value never changes. We do check for the value, but we never change the actual value, so fixed value. I forgot to put the row to keep the pattern. And that's everything for display end of game message. Then display correct guess game display correct guess message with a parameter score, and that probably sounds familiar because it is. We're going to copy and paste that from there to here, and some odd reading that wasn't okay. Next we have reset recent score, which has a parameter to begin with, and this parameter is, I'm sorry, getting lost in here. There we go. This parameter is the is the actual score that we want to change, and want is the keyword because we want to do a few stuff on it. The actual value doesn't matter, so it's not recent, and it's not anything else. It's not fixed value because we changed the value, and it's not a gatherer because it's not accumulating anything. So it must be the most wanted, just because that's we want to work with it. So row most wanted holder. And then we have a count, which is used on a loop. Loop is another keyword for stepper variable, so stepper, and that's everything for reset recent score. Then we have display recent score, which works in a very similar way as far as numbers of variables are concerned, but the row is a bit different because in this case we have the variable that's populated somewhere else, so we have the values filled in, and the values don't change. We just display, so we use the values but they don't change, so fixed value. And then we have another count, which once again will be a stepper. It should be already familiarized. You should have familiarized yourself with that. Should be easy for you to spot that by now because it's used on the loop over here. Alright, next, update recent score. Now, to update recent score, we have two parameters to begin with. We have the recent score itself, which is the value that we want to work with because we're changing that, and we want to check a few things on it as well to find where we can save. So both updated, that's where we want to work with. That's where we're working on, so that's the most wanted holder. And then we have the score, which once again is a very important value because that's the score that we're saving into the recent score. So once again, that's the most wanted holder. Alright, next is the player name. Now the player name, it's yet again a most wanted holder because that's one of the values that we're saving into the recent score. So row most wanted holder. Now, a way to think about it is that recent score is the most wanted holder, and score and player name are part of recent score. So if recent score is the most wanted holder, then the other two must be the most wanted holder as well. Alright, next we have yet another count, and once again that's a stepper. Row stepper. And then we have found space. Now found space is not the recent holder because it's not based on user input or anything, and that's something that we're checking for. So it's something that we want to have it populated. It's important. It's very important for the functionality of this particular procedure. So for that reason, that's the most wanted holder. And if you're wondering, yes, you can have more than one most wanted holder in the same procedure, because you might be wanting to do a bunch of stuff at once. It's not a problem. There isn't a rule saying you can only have one most wanted holder. Next, we have to the main procedure. Well, not the main, the play game procedure, which is where everything happens, as far as the game is concerned, at least. And we have two variables, two parameters. The first one being the DAC, and if you're paying attention from previous procedures, DAC is almost always the most wanted holder, with the exception of one procedure. And this one is not an exception, because this is a most wanted holder. The actual DAC, since we're playing the actual game, so it's the exact same reason why DAC is the most wanted holder on the main, because we're playing the game on the program, and that's the procedure where we actually play the game. So there's no way to play the game without having the cards, and if the cards are the most important thing, then to me that immediately makes it the most wanted holder. Next is the recent score, and here in here you can say that's it's the most recent holder, or you can say that once again is a transformation variable. There's not much difference from the main program. Excuse me. So just to keep it consistent, transformation, because this is populated in a fixed calculation, and yeah, okay. Next, number of cards turned over. That is used on the loop, and it holds the total number, so the cumulative number of cards turned over. So on this case, even though it's a variable, it's a loop variable, it's also used to hold something else. So it's both a stepper and a gatherer. And yes, it's perfectly fine for a variable to have more than one row. And on this case, there's not really much way around it. It is what it is. It uses it's both a loop variable, and it accumulates the number of cards, so it must be both. Alright, next is the game over. Now this is used to stop the loop as well, but that's not stepper, because the value doesn't increase on each loop, each cycle. This is the most wanted holder as well, because it's something important for the functionality of the game, to check if the game is finished or not. And it's one value that doesn't change on each cycle, so it's stepper, it's not gather, it's not recent holder. There's no transformation because it's not exactly a fixed calculation, although arguably you could say that it is, but it fits a most wanted holder row a lot better than if it's a transformation. Most wanted holder. Although you wouldn't be wrong to say that's a transformation simply because it updates its value in a fixed calculation. Row. Next we have the next card, which is once again you can invert them around. One will be the most wanted, the other one will be the most recent. Before I said that the last card is the most recent and the next card is the most wanted, so I'll keep it consistent. Most wanted holder, and this will be the most recent holder. Recent holder. Alright, then we have higher variable, which works in a very similar way as the game over. Both are booleans, so they're not gatherers, they're not steppers, they're not recent or anything. Go away, panda. So it must be out of elimination. We already can assume that it looks pretty well for most wanted holder, and because this is used to check if the next card is high or not, so it's something very relevant to the functionality of the overall procedure. Most wanted does fit. Row. Most wanted holder. And then we have the choice, which is used within a loop, which will hold the recent user choice. So recent is the keyword. Most recent holder. That's a lot of most. I think that's everything for the play game, and in fact that's the last procedure. So I know there was a lot of information at once, and I hope you guys were able to follow everything. Hope it wasn't too boring. That's a bit of the massive part. It's quite tiring. I am pretty tired at least. And well, thank you for watching. If you stayed with me all this time, and if you have any comments or feedback, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll certainly check and act on whatever you say. And if you like the video and you want to see more, feel free to like and subscribe. That way you tell me that you're liking the series and you want to see more, and if you subscribe, YouTube will tell you whenever I post a new video. So once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.